So, Emily, Wikipedia, what we've got here is a preemptive strike by the foundation. You refer to Wikimedia, so Wikimedia is the foundation that runs Wikipedia. I'll let you add to that in a minute. But basically, with preemptive strike, preventing Wikimedia from being categorized as a category 1 service. Sort of two messages coming out of this judgment that I pick up on. One is, sod off, you're going to be a category 1 if you're going to be a category 1 if the government decide it, but the government aren't going to be so stupid, are they? They're going to let you carry on doing sort of Wikipedia functions. Wikipedia lost the case. Will they be sad or happy?
I think it's kind of a win for both parties. So, or maybe a score draw, I would say, if you were thinking in football terms, because it was a preemptive strike by the Wikimedia Foundation.
What does that mean? Does that mean sort of a test case to add some
clarity?
In a
way, this is a very new piece of legislation, and so let's just do a sort of the legislation is the UK Online Safety Act. And it has a sliding scale of duties. So the bigger your service is, the more stringent your obligations are. And that kind of makes sense. And I think the particular harm that was in the policymakers' mind that they wanted to really use this legislation to combat is the phenomenon of virality. So, the Southport attacks, the tragedy there, that led to obviously the murder of young children. There was a lot of false stories that went viral about the alleged attacker, and so this is the kind of background to what's on the policymakers' mind. And now clearly everybody loves Wikipedia, so if you're passing a piece of legislation and you end up accidentally catching Wikipedia and giving them a whole load of very expensive stuff to do to comply, you've gone wrong.
Alice, everybody loves Wikipedia.
Everybody does love Wikipedia. I think what's really interesting about Wikipedia is it's very, very political. And I think we tend to think of things like, it's like a thesaurus, an encyclopedia. That was the traditional model. Things like dictionaries. We tend to think of them as a very neutral source of factual information. That is completely wrong. They are very, very affected by unconscious biases, cultural narratives. Truth is a very increasingly hard to define concept.
So they've got this community of volunteer editors.
Yeah.
Many of whom rely upon anonymity to avoid harassment, censorship, or even persecution in authoritative regimes where they're challenging their own regime as experts.
Yeah, well, if the way that things are defined on Wikipedia can be really controversial. You could try and define where a land border is in a country that's at war, and you're making a huge statement with a Wikipedia edit. And what's really interesting is that, the vast majority of Wikipedia editors are male. And, my experience of making one edit once on Wikipedia, it was taken down straight away with a kind of like, what are you talking about? And that is a very common experience for women editing Wikipedia. But I think what is happening, the way young people are responding to the Online Safety Act generally, this whole case is very in keeping with this, which is a big sense of like, what's going on, UK government?
I'll come back to that point. Yeah. So, Emily, the ruling does not give the government or the regulator Ofcom a green light, and they're saying that they while they found in Wikipedia's favour, it did not leave the door open for future legal challenge if Ofcom ultimately decides to classify the site as a Category 1 service. And just to remind us, a Category 1 service is in principle, and again it moves away from this engineering sort of binary argument, in principle it is an appropriate service for the most stringent duties. So the court's kind of saying, try it, Ofcom, and Ofcom saying, well, in principle, it is, So at the moment, the giants, the gods, the regulators and the courts are sort of having this gentleman's discussion that's surely going to make spectrum engineers just explode.
Yeah, there's so much going on in the judgment. For me, it's, for me with a legal background, I like it because it highlights the role of the courts in interpreting laws. So politicians make laws, the government implement those laws, and the judiciary interpret those laws and provide clarity. And I see this at play in the judgment. So, not a green light for Ofcom. Let's roll back a little bit. What this judgment does is it reveals how much goes on behind the scenes to try to make a law, go into practice. So Ofcom was given a duty to do lots of research, to really figure out how to implement these high-level things. And what you see is that they did all the stuff they were supposed to, that, controversial, perverse outcomes were very much in their mind and in the minister's mind as they sort of discussed the way forward. So they were thinking about Wikipedia, not exclusively, but they were thinking, we don't want to accidentally catch Wikipedia. And so while the court has said, okay, Wikimedia, you're totally ahead of the game, this isn't a green light for Ofcom, because the court is saying, look, Wikipedia, Alice has made some important points about Wikipedia's shortcomings. However, it is overall an incredibly valuable resource to humanity. It's an incredible source of information, of freedom of expression. And so the courts are like, if Ofcom, you do decide to classify Wikipedia as a Category 1 provider, we're going to give that very intense scrutiny, which is judgish for don't do it, guys.
I mean, I can't. I'm coming to you in a second, Alice. But as a senior engineer with my let's be real here, Jesus sandals and beard, I see these three Khaleesi dragons all sort of looking at each other and going, are you going to burn someone first? Are you going to burn? They're these three powerhouses, and they're all too scared to act. Alice, I don't want to encourage discrimination, but I am from the slightly older generation. So for me, age and ID verification is a monster. If we're going to have to validate our age and ID on all major platforms, do the young people care?
Young people care a lot, I think.
Right, aren't they used to it in pubs and clubs and shops?
I think it's really different because when you verify your ID online, that the photo of your passport or driving license is stored somewhere, even if it's only for a few seconds. But as we've seen with things like the T app leak, companies don't always comply with the rules, and they might be keeping a photo of your personal identification documents somewhere, and then that can be accessed. And we had a guest.
Oh yeah, no, I don't trust techies to hold loads of
We had a
docs.
comment actually from someone saying all of this is stuff that we are told all the time not to share online.
Right.
And so it's very confusing. It feels very like we've grown up being told, don't give out your personal details online, and now it's like you have to access articles on Wikipedia that are about more adult topics. Where does that leave us with the truth?
Yes. So I feel like we've moved from this age of Wild West tech fun explosion, and everything's narrowing down, but everyone's uncomfortable and worried about what's coming up. So question for you out there, please, in the comments. Do you like Wikipedia? Do you use Wikipedia? Would you use it as much if you had to go through mandatory age and ID verification? Thank you.